She stood in his doorway at midnight holding his daughter's hand, and that's when Ethan knew his carefully controlled life was about to fall apart. Maya's cheeks were streaked with tears, her small fingers wrapped around the stranger's wrist like a lifeline. The woman, dark hair falling loose over one shoulder, eyes tired but kind, didn't apologize for the intrusion. She just looked at him and said 5 words that made his chest tighten. She was calling for you. 3 weeks ago, this woman didn't exist in his world. Now she was standing between him and everything he'd built to survive. This is the story of how a single father who'd sworn off love found himself risking it all again. Not because he was ready, but because sometimes life doesn't ask permission before it rewrites your ending. If you're watching from your city tonight, drop a comment below and hit that like button. I want to see how far this story travels. Let's get started. The knock came at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning, which was already wrong because nothing good happened before 7. Ethan Walker stood at his kitchen counter with a coffee mug halfway to his lips, staring at the front door like it might explode. Maya was still asleep upstairs. The oatmeal on the stove was starting to burn. He set the mug down and crossed the small living room in 4 steps, pulling open the door to find a woman standing on his porch with a cardboard box balanced against one hip. She was maybe 28, with dark brown hair pulled into a messy knot and paint smudged across her collarbone. Her t-shirt had a faded logo he didn't recognize. She looked at him with the kind of direct eye contact that made people uncomfortable at government offices. "Hey," she said. "I'm Arya. I moved in next door yesterday. This got delivered to my place by mistake." She held out the box. It was addressed to him, care of Amazon, probably the router he'd ordered 3 weeks ago and forgotten about. "Thanks," Ethan said, taking it. His voice came out rougher than he intended. He hadn't spoken to another adult since dropping Maya off at school the day before. Arya didn't leave. She tilted her head slightly, studying him with an expression he couldn't read. "You always answer the door like you're expecting bad news?" "Usually am." She laughed, short and surprised. "Fair enough." There was a beat of silence. Ethan realized he was still holding the box between them like a shield. He lowered it. "I'm Ethan." "I know. Saw your name on the box." She shifted her weight, glanced past him into the house. "You've got a kid, right? I heard someone playing yesterday afternoon." "Yeah, Maya. She's 7. Cool. I'll try to keep the noise down. I paint, so sometimes I blast music without realizing it." "It's fine." Another pause. Arya's gaze flicked down to the box, then back up to his face. She had the kind of eyes that looked like they'd already decided something about you before you opened your mouth. "Well," she said, stepping back, "I'll let you get back to whatever you were doing. Just wanted to return that before it sat on my porch for a week." "Appreciate it." She turned and walked down the steps, her sneakers scuffing against the wood. Ethan watched her cross the narrow strip of lawn that separated their houses. His a pale blue 2-story with peeling paint around the windows, hers a faded yellow duplex that had been empty for 3 months. She glanced back once before disappearing inside, lifting a hand in a wave that felt more like punctuation than goodbye. Ethan closed the door. The oatmeal was definitely burning now. Maya came downstairs 20 minutes later wearing mismatched socks and a dress she'd insisted on picking out herself. It was bright pink with purple flowers, and she'd paired it with a green cardigan that made her look like a very small, very confident person who had no idea what color coordination meant. "Morning, Dad." "Morning, kiddo." Ethan scraped the ruined oatmeal into the trash and started over. "How'd you sleep?" "Good. I had a dream about a dinosaur who worked at a bakery." "That's weird." "Yeah." She climbed onto one of the kitchen chairs, her legs swinging. "What's for breakfast?" "Oatmeal." "Again?" She made a face but didn't complain. Maya had learned early not to push too hard on things that didn't matter. It was one of those traits that made Ethan's chest hurt when he thought about it too long. His 7-year-old daughter already practicing emotional triage because her parents couldn't figure out how to stay married. He poured the new batch of oatmeal into 2 bowls and added brown sugar to hers, honey to his. They ate in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the scrape of spoons against ceramic and the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. "There's a new lady next door," Maya said eventually. Ethan looked up. "How do you know that?" "I saw her yesterday when I was playing outside. She waved at me." "Did you wave back?" "Duh." He smiled despite himself. That's good. Her name's Arya. She brought over a package this morning. Is she nice? I don't know yet. Maya considered this, chewing slowly. She looked nice. Yeah? Yeah, she had paint on her hands. I like people with paint on their hands. Ethan didn't ask why. Maya had rules about people that she never explained, and he'd learned not to question them. If she liked someone, they were usually worth liking. If she didn't, they usually weren't. It was a better system than most adults had. They finished breakfast and got ready for school. Ethan packed her lunch, peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, string cheese, the same thing every day because Maya hated surprises in her lunchbox, and walked her to the bus stop 3 blocks away. The morning was cool, the sky still gray with leftover clouds from the night before. A few other parents stood in loose clusters, talking in low voices while their kids chased each other in circles. Maya hugged him before getting on the bus, quick and tight, and then she was gone, her backpack bouncing as she climbed the steps. Ethan watched the bus pull away and felt the familiar hollow weight settle into his chest. It happened every morning. He never got used to it. Wishab. The workshop behind his house smelled like sawdust and varnish. Ethan spent most of his days there, building furniture for people who wanted things that looked handmade but couldn't afford actual custom work. He was good at it, better than good, if he was being honest. But it didn't pay well enough to do anything except survive. He'd given up on thriving a long time ago. Today, he was working on a dining table for a couple in the next town over. They'd sent him a photo of something they'd seen in a catalog, asked if he could replicate it for half the price. He could. It wouldn't be as nice, but it would be close enough that they'd convince themselves it was exactly what they wanted. He'd been sanding the tabletop for maybe an hour when he heard music start up next door. It was loud, some kind of indie rock with a driving bass line and vocals that sounded like they were recorded in a garage. He paused, listening. The music cut off abruptly, then started again from the beginning. Ethan went back to sanding. The music played on repeat for the next 2 hours. By the time he stopped for lunch, he'd memorized the chorus without meaning to. He walked back into the house, made himself a sandwich, and ate it standing at the kitchen window, staring at the yellow duplex next door. He couldn't see inside, blinds drawn, curtains pulled, but he could imagine her in there, moving around with paint-stained hands and that same unreadable expression she'd worn on his porch. He finished the sandwich and went back to work. Maya's bus dropped her off at 3:15. Ethan met her at the stop and they walked home together, her hand small and warm in his. She talked the whole way, telling him about a substitute teacher who let them have extra recess and a boy named Jordan who'd brought a lizard to school in his backpack. Was it alive? Ethan asked. Yeah, it was green. That's cool. Jordan's weird, though. Why? I don't know, he just is. They turned onto their street and Maya stopped suddenly, pulling her hand free. Look, Dad, the new lady's outside. Ethan looked. Arya was sitting on her front steps with a sketchbook propped on her knees, her head bent over it in concentration. She had a pencil tucked behind one ear and another in her hand, moving fast across the page. She didn't look up. Can I go say hi? Maya asked. I don't think she wants to be bothered right now. How do you know? She's working. So? You work and people bother you all the time. Ethan didn't have a good answer for that. He watched Maya start across the lawn before he could stop her, her backpack bouncing with each step. She stopped a few feet from the steps and called out, Hi! Arya looked up, startled. Then she smiled. Hey, you're Maya, right? Yeah, my dad told me your name this morning. Did he? Arya glanced past Maya to where Ethan stood on the sidewalk, and her smile shifted into something more amused. That's nice of him. Maya climbed the steps uninvited and sat down next to her. What are you drawing? Just some ideas for a painting, nothing exciting. Can I see? Arya hesitated, then turned the sketchbook so Maya could see. Ethan couldn't make out the details from where he stood, but he saw Maya's face light up in that way it did when she was genuinely interested in something. That's really good, Maya said. Thanks. You like art? I don't know. I've never tried it. You should. It's fun. They talked for another minute, their voices too low for Ethan to hear. Then Maya hopped up, waved goodbye, and ran back across the lawn. Arya watched her go, then looked at Ethan again. She didn't wave this time. just held his gaze for a second before going back to her sketchbook. "She's nice," Maya announced when she reached him. "I can see that. She said I could come over sometime and she'd teach me how to draw. That's generous of her. Can I?" "We'll see." Maya groaned but didn't push it. They went inside and started the afternoon routine, homework at the kitchen table. Snack, TV for 30 minutes while Ethan prepped dinner. It was the same every day, structured and predictable, and Ethan liked it that way. Predictable meant safe. Safe meant he didn't have to think too hard about what came next. Arya knocked on his door again 2 days later, this time at 5 in the afternoon. Ethan was in the middle of helping Maya with a math worksheet, which was going badly because neither of them understood the new way they were teaching subtraction. He opened the door and found her holding a casserole dish wrapped in a towel. "I made too much lasagna," she said without preamble. "Thought you might want some." Ethan blinked. "You didn't have to do that." "I know, but it's just going to sit in my fridge and get weird if I don't give it away, so you're doing me a favor." She held out the dish. Ethan took it automatically, the warmth seeping through the towel into his hands. It smelled amazing, garlic and tomato and cheese layered so thick he could feel the weight of it. "Thanks," he said. "No problem." She started to leave, then paused. "How's Maya doing with her homework?" "How did you—" "I can see her through the window. She looks frustrated." Ethan glanced back. Maya was slumped over the table, her pencil dangling from one hand, her face twisted in theatrical agony. "We're working on subtraction," he said. "It's not going great. Want some help?" "You don't have to. I used to tutor kids in college. I'm good at math." Ethan hesitated. It felt like letting someone in, which was the thing he'd spent 3 years learning not to do. But Maya looked miserable, and he was out of ideas, and Arya was standing there with that same direct eye contact that made it hard to say no. "All right," he said. "Come in." Arya sat down at the kitchen table across from Maya and pulled the worksheet toward her. She studied it for a second, then laughed. "Oh, this is the new math. Yeah, this is confusing. See?" Maya said, gesturing at Ethan. "I told you." "It's not that bad once you get it," Arya said. "Here, let me show you a trick." She grabbed a piece of scrap paper and started drawing circles, breaking down the problem in a way that actually made sense. Maya leaned in, watching closely, and within 5 minutes she was nodding along and picking up her pencil again. Ethan stood by the counter, still holding the lasagna, and watched them work together. Arya's voice was patient but not condescending, and she didn't rush Maya through the steps. When Maya got something right, Arya smiled like it was the best thing that had happened all day. "Try this one," Arya said, pointing to the next problem. Maya worked through it slowly, muttering to herself. When she finished, she looked up. "Like that?" "Exactly like that. You're a natural." Maya beamed. They finished the worksheet in 20 minutes. Arya stood, stretched, and handed the paper back to Maya. "Good job, kid. You're smarter than half the people I went to college with." "Really?" "Really." Ethan walked her to the door. "Thanks," he said again. "That was really helpful." "Anytime. I meant it when I said I used to tutor. I don't mind." "I'll keep that in mind." Arya paused on the porch, her hands shoved into the pockets of her jeans. "She's a good kid, by the way. You're doing something right." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. He nodded, and Arya left, disappearing into the dusk without another word. After that, she started showing up more. Not every day, and never for long, but enough that Ethan began to expect it. She'd bring over leftovers, or stop by to borrow sugar, or knock on the door to ask if Maya wanted to come over and paint. Maya always said yes. Ethan always said it was fine. The first time Maya went to Arya's place, Ethan walked her over and stood awkwardly in the doorway while Arya cleared space at her kitchen table. The duplex was smaller than his house, just 2 rooms and a bathroom, but it felt bigger somehow, light pouring in through the windows, paintings propped against every available surface, the smell of coffee and turpentine mixing in the air. "She'll be fine," Arya said, glancing at him. "I promise I won't let her drink paint thinner or anything." That's reassuring. "Go do whatever it is you do when she's not around. We'll be here." Ethan left, but he didn't go far. He went back to his workshop and tried to focus on the chair he was building, but he kept glancing at the clock, counting down the hour he'd told Maya she could stay. When he finally walked back over to pick her up, he found them both covered in paint, laughing at something he couldn't hear through the closed door. Maya held up a canvas when she saw him. "Look what I made!" It was abstract, just swirls of color that didn't form anything recognizable, but she looked so proud that Ethan's throat tightened. "It's great, kiddo." "Arya helped me." "She did most of it herself," Arya said, wiping her hands on a rag. "I just kept her from knocking over the paint." Maya hugged Arya before they left, quick and impulsive, and Arya hugged her back without hesitation. Ethan watched the exchange and felt something shift in his chest, something uncomfortable and unfamiliar, like a door he'd nailed shut starting to crack open. 3 weeks after Arya moved in, the town held its annual summer festival. It was the kind of event that small towns did to convince themselves they still had a pulse. Local vendors, a few food trucks, live music on a stage that looked like it might collapse if someone sneezed too hard. Maya had been talking about it for days, circling the date on the kitchen calendar with a red marker. Ethan hadn't planned on going. He didn't like crowds, didn't like the forced cheer of community events, didn't like the inevitable run-ins with people who wanted to ask how he was doing in that tone that meant they already knew the answer. But Maya wore him down the way she always did, with persistence and big eyes and the unspoken reminder that he was all she had. "Fine," he said the morning of the festival. "We'll go." Maya cheered and immediately started planning her outfit. They left the house at noon, walking the 6 blocks to the town square. The sun was bright and hot, the kind of heat that made everything shimmer. Maya held his hand the whole way, skipping every few steps, pointing out dogs and interesting clouds, and a man on a bicycle who waved at them for no reason. The square was packed. Families clustered around picnic tables, kids running between booths, the smell of fried dough and barbecue thick in the air. Ethan bought Maya a lemonade and a funnel cake, and they found a spot under a tree to sit and watch the chaos. "This is fun," Maya said, her mouth full of powdered sugar. "Yeah? Yeah, I'm glad we came." Ethan was about to respond when he saw Arya across the square. She was standing near the stage, talking to a woman with a clipboard. She looked different in the daylight, her hair down, wearing a sundress that made her look softer than she did in paint-stained t-shirts. She laughed at something the woman said, and the sound carried over the noise. Maya followed his gaze. "There's Arya! Can we go say hi?" "She looks busy." "So? Come on." Maya grabbed his hand and dragged him across the square before he could argue. They weaved through the crowd, dodging strollers and groups of teenagers until they reached the stage. Arya turned just as they approached, and her face brightened. "Hey, I didn't know you guys were coming." "Maya insisted," Ethan said. "Smart kid." Arya crouched down to Maya's level. "You having fun?" "Yeah, Dad got me funnel cake." "Nice. That's the best part of these things." The woman with the clipboard cleared her throat. "Arya, we really need to finalize this." "Right, sorry." Arya stood, glanced at Ethan. "They're doing this stupid contest later. I got roped into helping organize it." "What kind of contest?" "Kissing contest. It's exactly as ridiculous as it sounds." Maya giggled. "That's weird." "Super weird," Arya agreed. "But people love it for some reason." The woman with the clipboard looked between Arya and Ethan, her expression calculating. "Actually, we're still short a few couples. You two should enter." "What?" Ethan said. "No," Arya said at the same time. "Come on, it'll be fun, and we need more participants or the whole thing's going to look sad." "Find someone else," Arya said firmly. "There is no one else. Everyone's either already signed up or actively running away from me." The woman looked at Ethan. "It's for charity. All the entry fees go to the youth center." Maya tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "You should do it, Dad." "Absolutely not." "Why not?" "It's for charity." "Because I'm not kissing a stranger in front of the entire town." "Arya's not a stranger. She's our friend." Arya laughed, sharp and surprised. "Kid, you're not helping." But the woman with the clipboard had already latched onto the idea. "Perfect. You're friends. That makes it even better. Low pressure." "That's not—" Ethan started. "Please?" Maya said, looking up at him with those eyes that always won. "It's for charity." Ethan looked at Arya. She looked back, her expression caught somewhere between amused and horrified. For a second, neither of them said anything. "This is a terrible idea," Arya said finally. "Completely terrible," Ethan agreed. Exactly, the woman said, taking their agreement as consent. I'll put you down. Contest starts at 3. Don't be late. She walked away before either of them could argue further. Arya stared after her, then turned to Ethan. I think we just got scammed. I think you're right. Maya grinned. This is going to be so funny. They spent the next 2 hours wandering the festival together, the three of them falling into an easy rhythm that felt more natural than it should have. Arya bought Maya a balloon shaped like a dog. Ethan won her a stuffed bear at a ring toss game that was definitely rigged. They sat on a bench and ate snow cones while a local band played covers of songs that were already 20 years out of date. At some point, Ethan realized he was enjoying himself. Not the quiet, controlled kind of enjoyment he'd taught himself to accept, but the real kind. The kind that made his chest feel lighter, that made him forget for a few minutes about routines and predictability and the careful distance he kept between himself and everything else. He glanced at Arya. She was laughing at something Maya said, her head tilted back, her hair catching the sunlight. She looked over and caught him staring, and for a second, neither of them looked away. What? She said. Nothing. You're bad at lying. I know. 3 o'clock came too fast. The woman with the clipboard found them near the food trucks and herded them toward the stage, where a crowd had already started to gather. Ethan's stomach dropped. I can't believe we're doing this, he muttered. We could still run, Arya said. Maya would never forgive me. Fair point. They climbed onto the stage with 4 other couples, all of whom looked far more enthusiastic about the whole thing than Ethan felt. The woman with the clipboard explained the rules. Each couple would kiss for as long as they could, and the last pair still kissing would win. It was juvenile and awkward, and exactly the kind of thing Ethan had spent his entire adult life avoiding. You ready? Arya asked, her voice low. No. Me neither. The woman counted down. 3, 2, 1. Arya stepped closer. Ethan's heart was hammering so hard he was sure she could hear it. She put one hand on his shoulder, light and tentative, and leaned in. Their lips met. It was supposed to be quick, detached, a performance for a crowd that didn't matter. But the second her mouth touched his, something shifted. The noise of the festival faded. The stage disappeared. The world narrowed to the warmth of her hand on his shoulder, the softness of her lips, the faint smell of paint and coffee that clung to her skin. Ethan forgot to breathe. Arya pulled back slightly, just enough to meet his eyes. Hers were wide, startled, like she'd felt it too. Then she leaned in again, and this time it wasn't for the contest. This time it was real. The crowd was cheering, but Ethan didn't hear them. He didn't hear anything except the rush of blood in his ears and the small, shaky exhale Arya made against his mouth. His hand came up to her waist without him deciding to do it, and she moved closer, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew this was a mistake. Knew he was crossing a line he'd drawn for a reason. Knew he was going to regret this. But he didn't stop. When they finally broke apart, the other couples had already dropped out. The crowd was roaring. The woman with the clipboard was trying to hand them a trophy that looked like it had been bought at a dollar store. Arya stepped back, her face flushed, her hand dropping from his shoulder. She looked at him like she was trying to figure out what had just happened. Ethan looked back, and he didn't have an answer. Well, she said quietly. That was unexpected. Ethan nodded. His voice didn't work. They climbed off the stage together. Maya ran up to them, jumping up and down, talking a mile a minute about how cool it was that they'd won. Ethan barely heard her. He was too busy trying to remember how to think straight, trying to push down the panic clawing its way up his throat. Arya caught his arm before he could walk away. Hey, she said. Are we okay? Yeah, he lied. She didn't believe him. He could see it in her eyes. But she let him go anyway, and Ethan walked back through the crowd with Maya's hand in his, feeling like he'd just set fire to something he couldn't put out. That night, after Maya went to bed, Ethan sat on the back porch and stared at the workshop in the dark. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against his knees and tried to breathe through the tightness in his chest. He'd spent 3 years building a life that worked, a life that didn't ask too much of him, didn't demand anything he couldn't give. He'd learned how to be enough for Maya, how to wake up every morning and keep moving even when it felt like dragging dead weight. He'd learned how to survive. And now Arya was here, and surviving didn't feel like enough anymore. He didn't know what to do with that. Didn't know how to want something without being terrified of losing it. Didn't know how to let someone in when the last time he'd tried, it had gutted him so completely that he'd spent a year just learning how to sleep through the night again. Ethan sat there until the stars came out, until the air turned cold, until he couldn't feel his hands anymore. Then he went inside, locked the door behind him, and went to bed. He didn't sleep. The avoidance started the next morning. Ethan heard Arya's door open at 7:30 while he was making coffee, heard her footsteps on the porch, heard her car start up and pull away. He stood at the kitchen window and watched her taillights disappear down the street, feeling relief and disappointment in equal measure. Maya came downstairs wearing her school uniform inside out. She didn't notice, and Ethan didn't have the energy to care. "Is Arya coming over today?" she asked, pouring herself a glass of orange juice. "I don't think so." "Why not?" "She's probably busy." Maya frowned. "She wasn't busy yesterday." "Well, people get busy." "That doesn't make sense." Ethan handed her a bowl of cereal and didn't answer. Maya ate in silence, swinging her legs under the table, occasionally glancing at him like she was trying to solve a puzzle. She was too smart for 7. It made lying to her harder than it should be. They walked to the bus stop without talking much. The morning was cool, the sky washed out and pale. When the bus pulled up, Maya hugged him tighter than usual, her small arms wrapped around his waist. "You're acting weird, Dad." "I'm fine." "You say that a lot." She pulled back and looked at him with those serious eyes that reminded him too much of her mother. Then she turned and climbed onto the bus without another word. Ethan watched it drive away and felt the hollow weight settle back into his chest, heavier than before. He went to the workshop and tried to work. The dining table was nearly finished, just needed another coat of varnish and some final sanding on the edges. He turned on the radio to fill the silence, but every song sounded wrong. After an hour, he gave up and sat on the floor with his back against the workbench, staring at nothing. The kiss kept replaying in his head. Not the performance part, not the crowd or the stage or the stupid trophy. Just the moment when Arya's hand had touched his shoulder and everything else had disappeared. The way she'd tasted like cherry snow cone. The way she'd looked at him after, like she was just as confused as he was. Ethan pressed his palms against his eyes until he saw stars. This was exactly why he didn't let people in. This right here, the mess, the wanting, the inevitable collapse when it all fell apart because it always fell apart. He stayed in the workshop until noon, then forced himself to go inside and eat something. The house felt too quiet. He turned on the TV just for the noise, some daytime talk show where people screamed at each other about paternity tests. He watched it without seeing it, his sandwich forgotten on the plate beside him. At 2 o'clock, his phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "It's Arya. Maya gave me your number last week. We should probably talk." Ethan stared at the screen. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. He could ignore it, pretend he hadn't seen it, let the whole thing fade into awkward history until they became the neighbors who waved politely and never spoke. He typed back, "Yeah." "When?" The response came immediately. "Tonight? After Maya's asleep?" "Okay." He set the phone down and felt his stomach twist. This was a mistake. Talking about it would make it real, would give it weight and shape and consequence. Better to let it die quietly. But he'd already agreed. The afternoon dragged. Ethan picked Maya up from the bus stop and listened to her talk about a spelling test she thought she'd failed but probably hadn't. They went home and did homework at the kitchen table, the same routine as always. Maya kept glancing toward Arya's house, and Ethan kept pretending not to notice. "Can I go see if Arya wants to paint?" she asked after finishing her math worksheet. "Not today." "Why not?" "Because I said so." Maya's face fell. "That's not a real reason. It's the only one you're getting." She didn't argue, but she looked at him like he'd just broken a promise. Ethan felt the guilt settle heavy in his gut, but he didn't take it back. He couldn't handle watching Maya get attached to someone who might not stay. Not again. They had dinner. Grilled cheese and tomato soup, easy and fast. Maya ate without complaining, but she was quieter than usual, pushing her sandwich around her plate. Ethan wanted to say something to fix it, but he didn't know what. "Sorry your dad's a coward" didn't seem like the right thing to tell a 7-year-old. After dinner, Maya took a bath and put herself to bed early. Ethan stood in her doorway and watched her pull the covers up to her chin, her stuffed bear tucked under one arm. "Night, Dad? Night, kiddo? Are you mad at Arya?" The question caught him off guard. "What? No." "Then why are you being weird about her?" "I'm not being weird." Maya looked at him like he was the least convincing liar in the world. "Okay? Get some sleep." "Okay." He closed the door and stood in the hallway, listening to the house settle around him. The refrigerator hummed. The bathroom faucet dripped. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. At 8:30, someone knocked on the door. Ethan opened it to find Arya standing on the porch, with her hands shoved in her jacket pockets. She looked tired. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup. She looked more real than she had at the festival, and somehow that made it worse. "Hey," she said. "Hey." They stood there for a beat, neither of them moving. Then Arya gestured toward the porch swing. "Want to sit out here?" "I don't want to wake Maya." "Yeah, sure." They sat down, leaving a careful gap between them. The swing creaked under their weight, swaying slightly. The night was cool, the kind of late summer evening that hinted at fall. Crickets chirped in the grass. A car drove past, headlights sweeping across the yard. Arya spoke first. "So that was weird." "Yeah." "I wasn't expecting it to feel like that." Ethan looked at her. She was staring straight ahead, her jaw tight. "What did it feel like?" he asked. "I don't know. Real." She let out a short laugh. Which is stupid because it was a contest. It wasn't supposed to be anything. But it was. "Yeah." Silence stretched between them. Ethan watched a moth circle the porch light, throwing itself against the glass over and over. He wanted to say something that would make this easier, something that would let them both walk away and pretend it hadn't happened. But the words didn't come. "I like you," Arya said suddenly. "I didn't plan on it, but I do." Ethan's chest tightened. "Arya, let me finish." She turned to face him, her expression serious. "I like you, and I like Maya, and I don't do this. I don't get involved with people who have kids. I don't do complicated. But here we are." "Here we are," Ethan echoed. "So I need to know if this is something or if I'm just making an idiot of myself." He should say no, should tell her it wasn't something, couldn't be something, because he didn't have the capacity to handle more than what he already had. Should protect himself and Maya and the fragile stability they'd built. "I don't know," he said instead. Arya's face didn't change. "That's honest, at least. I haven't done this in a long time." "Done what? Dated?" "Wanted to." She studied him for a long moment. "What happened with Maya's mom?" Ethan looked away. "It's not a good story." "I'm not asking for a good story. I'm asking for the truth." He took a breath, let it out slowly. "We got married too young, had Maya too fast, spent 5 years trying to make it work and failing. She left when Maya was 4, decided she didn't want to be a mother anymore." "Jesus." "Yeah." "Does she see Maya?" "Christmas and birthdays, sometimes." Ethan's voice came out flat, emotionless. He'd told this story enough times that it didn't hurt anymore. Or maybe it hurt so much he'd stopped noticing. "She sends cards, calls once in a while, but she's got a new life now, new husband, new city. Maya doesn't really fit into it." Arya was quiet for a moment, then she said, "That's fucked up." "Yeah." "And you've been doing this alone ever since?" "Pretty much." "That's a lot." Ethan shrugged. "It's what it is." The swing creaked. Arya shifted, pulling her knees up to her chest. "For what it's worth, you're doing a good job. Maya's a great kid. She is. And you're terrified I'm going to leave too." It wasn't a question. Ethan didn't bother denying it. "Wouldn't you be?" "Probably." Arya rested her chin on her knees, looking at him sideways. "But I'm not her. I don't make promises I can't keep." "Everyone says that." "I know, but I mean it." Ethan wanted to believe her, wanted it so badly it scared him. "I can't do this halfway," he said quietly. "If we do this, if we try, I need to know you're in. Because Maya gets attached fast, and if you're going to bail, I need you to do it now before she gets hurt." "What about you?" "What about me?" "Do you get attached fast too?" He didn't answer. Arya reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm and sure. Ethan looked down at their joined hands and felt something crack open in his chest. "I'm in," she said. "I don't know where this goes, and I'm probably going to screw it up at some point, but I'm in." Ethan met her eyes. "Okay? Okay?" "Yeah." Arya smiled, small and uncertain. "So now what?" "I have no idea." She laughed, the sound breaking the tension. "Great. Two people who have no idea what they're doing. This is going to go great. Probably a disaster. Definitely a disaster." They sat there holding hands while the crickets chirped and the porch swing swayed. Ethan felt the fear still sitting heavy in his gut, but underneath it was something else. Something that felt almost like hope. After a while, Arya stood up. "I should go. Let you get some sleep." "Yeah." She squeezed his hand once before letting go. "We'll figure it out." "Will we?" "We'll try." She walked down the porch steps and across the lawn to her house. Ethan watched her go, watched her turn and wave before disappearing inside. Then he sat there alone in the dark, trying to remember how to breathe normally. The next morning, Maya noticed immediately. She came downstairs and found Ethan making pancakes instead of oatmeal, and her eyes went wide. "What's happening?" "Pancakes? I know that. But why?" "Can I make pancakes?" "You never make pancakes." Ethan flipped one onto a plate and handed it to her. "Well, I'm making them now." Maya sat down slowly, eyeing him with suspicion. "You're still being weird. Eat your pancakes." She did, but she kept watching him like he might suddenly start speaking a different language. Ethan poured batter onto the griddle and tried to act normal, which was impossible when he felt like his entire life had shifted sideways overnight. After breakfast, he walked Maya to the bus stop. They were halfway there when she said, "Did you and Arya have a fight?" "What? No." "Then why didn't she come over yesterday?" "She was busy." "You keep saying that." Ethan sighed. "We talked last night. Everything's fine." "About what?" "Grown-up stuff." "That's not an answer." "It's the answer you're getting." Maya made a face but didn't push it. When the bus arrived, she hugged him and climbed aboard, glancing back once before finding a seat. Ethan waved and headed home, his mind already spinning ahead to everything he didn't know how to handle. He was in the workshop sanding the dining table when his phone buzzed. Another text from Arya. "Maya still allowed to come over and paint, or are we pretending I don't exist?" Ethan smiled despite himself. "She can come over. She's been asking." "Good." "I missed her." "Just her?" There was a pause, then, "Don't push your luck." Ethan laughed out loud, the sound startling in the quiet workshop. He set his phone down and went back to work, feeling lighter than he had in days. That afternoon, when Maya got off the bus, Ethan told her she could go to Arya's. Her face lit up so fast he felt guilty for making her wait. "Really? Really? For an hour? Can I go now?" "Finish your homework first." Maya groaned but didn't argue. She tore through her math worksheet in record time, barely checking her answers, and then she was out the door before Ethan could remind her to be polite. He watched her sprint across the lawn and knock on Arya's door, bouncing on her heels until it opened. Arya appeared, and Maya launched into an explanation of something Ethan couldn't hear from the porch. Arya listened, nodding, then glanced over at him. She smiled. Ethan smiled back. Maya disappeared inside, and the door closed. Ethan went back into the house and tried to focus on anything other than the fact that two of the most important people in his life were currently in the same room without him. It shouldn't feel this significant. It was just painting. Just an hour. But it felt like more than that. An hour turned into 2. Ethan was starting to wonder if he should go check on them when Maya finally came home, her hands covered in blue paint and her hair sticking up at odd angles. "We made a dragon," she announced. "A dragon?" "Yeah, it's breathing fire and everything. Arya said I could keep it." "That's nice of her." Maya sat down at the kitchen table and started talking about the painting in exhaustive detail. What colors they'd used, how Arya had shown her a trick for making scales, how they'd argued about whether dragons had 2 legs or 4. Ethan listened and made the appropriate noises, but mostly he just watched her face, animated and happy in a way she hadn't been in weeks. Later, after Maya went to bed, Ethan stood at the kitchen window and looked at the yellow duplex next door. The lights were on. He could see Arya moving around inside, just a shadow behind the curtains. His phone buzzed. She's a good kid. You know that, right? I know. You should be proud. I am. Another pause. Then, good night, Ethan. Good night. He set the phone down and stood there for a while longer, watching the lights until they went out. The days started to blur together after that, falling into a new kind of routine. Arya came over for dinner twice a week. Maya spent Saturday afternoons at her place, painting or drawing or just talking. Ethan found himself looking for excuses to walk over, to borrow tools he didn't need, or return dishes from meals she'd brought over days ago. They didn't kiss again. Didn't even touch, really, beyond the occasional brush of hands when passing something across the table. It felt intentional, like they were both waiting for the right moment, or maybe just terrified of the wrong one. 3 weeks after the festival, Arya showed up at his door on a Tuesday night with a 6-pack of beer and a deck of cards. "Maya asleep?" she asked. "Yeah, why?" "Because I'm bored, and you look like you could use a drink." Ethan stepped aside and let her in. They sat at the kitchen table and played gin rummy while the beer got warm and the house settled into nighttime quiet. Arya was terrible at cards but refused to admit it, insisting she was just letting him win. "You're full of it," Ethan said, laying down a winning hand. "That's 3 games. You're clearly cheating. How would I even cheat at gin rummy?" "I don't know, but you're doing it." They played until midnight, talking about nothing important. Arya told him about a painting she was working on for a gallery show. Ethan told her about a custom bookshelf order that was driving him crazy because the client kept changing their mind. It was easy, comfortable, the kind of conversation that didn't ask for anything except presence. When Arya finally stood to leave, Ethan walked her to the door. She paused on the threshold, her hand on the frame. "This is nice," she said quietly. "What is this? You, Maya, all of it." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. Arya smiled and stepped outside, but before she could walk away, Ethan caught her wrist. "Wait." She turned back. "What?" He didn't plan it, didn't think about it. He just leaned in and kissed her, soft and quick, nothing like the kiss at the festival. When he pulled back, Arya was staring at him with wide eyes. "What was that for?" she asked. "I don't know. Felt right." Her mouth curved into a smile. "Yeah, it did." She kissed him again, slower this time, her hand coming up to cup his jaw. Ethan felt the fear still lurking in the back of his mind, but it was quieter now, drowned out by the warmth of her mouth and the steady rhythm of her breathing. When they finally broke apart, Arya rested her forehead against his. "We're doing this," she said. "Yeah. We're really doing this." "Yeah." She laughed, soft and breathless. "Okay then." She left, and Ethan closed the door behind her, leaning against it with his eyes closed. His heart was racing. His hands were shaking. He felt terrified and alive and completely out of his depth, but he also felt something else. He felt ready. The next morning, Maya came downstairs and found him making French toast. She stopped in the doorway, her eyes narrowing. "Okay, what's going on?" "What do you mean?" "You're making fancy breakfast again. You only do that when something happened." Ethan plated the French toast and set it in front of her. "Can't I just make breakfast?" "Not without a reason." He sat down across from her, debating how much to say. Maya was 7, but she wasn't stupid. She'd figure it out eventually, might as well be honest. "Arya and I are going to start spending more time together," he said carefully. Maya tilted her head. "You already spend time together." "I mean like dating." Her eyes went wide. "Like boyfriend and girlfriend?" "Sort of, yeah." "Does that mean she's going to be my mom?" Ethan's stomach dropped. "No, kiddo, that's not... She's not replacing anybody. She's just someone who cares about us." "But if you're dating, doesn't that mean she'll be around more?" "Probably." "Good." Maya picked up her fork and dug into the French toast. "I like her." "Yeah?" "Yeah. She's funny. And she's nice to you." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "She is. Plus she lets me use the expensive paint." He laughed. "That too." They finished breakfast and Maya went to get ready for school. Ethan cleared the table and stood at the sink, staring out the window at the yellow duplex. Arya's car was still in the driveway. The curtains were drawn. His phone buzzed. "Maya okay with this?" "She said she likes you." "Good." I like her too. Just her? You're really milking that, aren't you? Ethan smiled. Maybe. Fine. I like you too. Happy? Getting there. He pocketed his phone and went to wake Maya, feeling something unfamiliar settling into his chest. It took him a minute to recognize it. It felt like the beginning of something good. The good feeling lasted exactly 2 weeks before reality caught up with them. It started small. Arya had to cancel dinner one night because a client needed revisions on a commission piece. Then Ethan had to work late on a rush order for a furniture store in the next county. Maya came down with a cold and spent 3 days home from school, feverish and cranky, which meant Arya stayed away to avoid getting sick. The gaps between seeing each other stretched longer, and the easy rhythm they'd found started to feel fragile. Ethan told himself it was normal. Life got in the way sometimes. That's what happened when you tried to build something real instead of just drifting through the motions. But doubt crept in anyway, quiet and persistent. On a Thursday afternoon, Ethan was in the workshop finishing a set of chairs when his phone rang. He almost didn't answer. He was covered in sawdust and the glue was starting to set, but the caller ID said Maya's school. His stomach dropped. Mr. Walker, this is Principal Chen. Maya's fine, but we need you to come pick her up. What happened? She got into an altercation with another student. No one's hurt, but we have a zero-tolerance policy for physical conflict. Ethan's mind went blank. Physical conflict, Maya? She pushed a boy during recess. We've already called his parents. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He hung up, stripped off his work gloves, and grabbed his keys. The drive to the school felt longer than it was, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Maya didn't push kids. She barely raised her voice. She was the kid who cried when other kids fought, who made friends with everyone, who brought home notes from teachers about what a pleasure she was to have in class. He found her sitting outside the principal's office, her arms crossed, her face red and blotchy from crying. When she saw him, her lips started to tremble. Ethan crouched down in front of her. Hey, you okay? I didn't mean to. Didn't mean to what? Push him, but he was saying mean things, and I told him to stop, and he didn't stop, and I just... Her voice broke. I'm sorry, Dad. We'll talk about it. Come on. Principal Chen was a tall woman with graying hair and the kind of calm expression that made Ethan feel like he was the one in trouble. She gestured for him to sit, and Maya climbed into the chair beside him, staring at her shoes. Maya's not in serious trouble, the principal said, but she needs to understand that we don't solve problems with our hands. I know that, Maya said quietly. Then why did you push Jordan? Maya's jaw tightened. She didn't answer. Ethan looked at her. Maya, what did he say? It doesn't matter. It does to me. She picked at a loose thread on her sleeve, her eyes still down. He said I was lying about having a mom. He said I made her up because nobody wanted me. The words hit Ethan like a punch to the chest. He forced himself to stay calm, to keep his voice level. And what did you say? I told him my mom lives in California and she's real, but he kept saying I was a liar, so I pushed him. Principal Chen sighed. Maya, I understand you were upset, but pushing someone isn't the answer. I know. Do you? Yes. The principal looked at Ethan. I'm giving her a warning this time, but if it happens again, we'll have to consider suspension. It won't happen again, Ethan said. They left the office and walked to the car in silence. Maya climbed into the back seat and buckled herself in, still not looking at him. Ethan got behind the wheel and sat there for a minute, trying to figure out what to say. You're not in trouble, he said finally. Maya looked up, surprised. I'm not? No, but we need to talk about this. I know I shouldn't have pushed him. That's not what I mean. Ethan turned in his seat to face her. Kids are cruel sometimes. They say things to hurt you because they don't know better, or because someone hurt them first, and when that happens, it's okay to be angry. But I shouldn't push people. No, but being angry doesn't make you bad. Maya's eyes filled with tears again. He said nobody wanted me. That's not true. But Mom left. Ethan's throat tightened. I know. So maybe he's right. Maybe she didn't want me. Maya, look at me. He waited until she met his eyes. Your mom leaving had nothing to do with you. That was her choice, her problem. It doesn't mean you're not wanted. It doesn't mean you're not enough. Then why did she go? I don't know, kiddo. I wish I had a better answer. Maya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I miss her sometimes, even though she's not really here anyway. I know. Do you miss her? Ethan thought about it. I used to, not anymore. Because of Arya? The question caught him off guard. Maybe, I don't know. Maya nodded slowly, like she was filing that information away. Arya wouldn't leave, would she? I don't think so. But you're not sure. He wanted to lie, to give her the certainty she was asking for, but Maya deserved better than that. Nobody's sure about anything, kiddo, but I think she's planning to stick around. Okay. They drove home, and Ethan let her watch TV for the rest of the afternoon, even though it was a school day. She curled up on the couch with her stuffed bear and didn't say much, and Ethan sat in the kitchen pretending to work on invoices while really just staring at his laptop screen. At 6, someone knocked on the door. Ethan opened it to find Arya standing there with a grocery bag in one hand and a worried expression on her face. I heard what happened, she said. How? Small town. Mrs. Patterson at the post office told me. Of course she did. Arya held up the bag. I brought ice cream and pizza. Figured you guys might need it. Ethan stepped aside and let her in. Maya looked up from the couch, her face brightening for the first time all afternoon. Hey kid, Arya said, setting the bag on the counter. Rough day? Yeah. Want to talk about it? Not really. Fair enough. Arya pulled out a pint of chocolate ice cream and 3 spoons. Want to eat feelings instead? Maya smiled, small but real. Okay. They sat on the couch together, the 3 of them squeezed in with the ice cream balance between them. Nobody talked about school or pushing or cruel kids. They just ate ice cream and watched some animated movie Maya had seen a dozen times, and Ethan felt the tension in his chest start to ease. After Maya went to bed, Arya stayed. She helped him clean up the kitchen, moving around the space like she'd been doing it for years instead of weeks. When they finished, she leaned against the counter and looked at him. You doing okay? I don't know. Ask me tomorrow. She's tough. She'll be fine. I know, it's just... Ethan ran a hand through his hair. I can't protect her from everything. I can't stop kids from being cruel. I can't make her mom give a damn. No. But you can be here. And you are. Is that enough? It's more than a lot of kids get. Ethan wanted to believe that. He looked at Arya standing in his kitchen like she belonged there and felt something shift in his chest. Thanks for coming over. Of course. You didn't have to. I know, but I wanted to. She pushed off the counter and walked over to him, sliding her arms around his waist. You're not doing this alone anymore. You know that, right? Ethan held her, his chin resting on the top of her head. I'm starting to. They stood there for a long moment, the house quiet around them. Then Arya pulled back and kissed him, soft and steady, and Ethan let himself sink into it without overthinking for once. The weeks that followed felt like walking a tightrope. Good days mixed with hard ones. Maya bounced back faster than Ethan expected, but she was quieter at school, more guarded. Ethan tried to give her space while also keeping an eye on her, which was an exhausting balance to maintain. Arya helped where she could, showing up with art supplies or suggesting weekend trips to the lake, little things that gave Maya something to look forward to. But there were moments when Ethan felt the weight of it all pressing down. Single parenthood, a relationship he didn't know how to navigate, the constant fear that he was screwing it all up. He didn't talk about it much, didn't want to burden Arya with the mess inside his head. She noticed anyway. One Saturday morning, she showed up at his door with 2 coffees and a determined expression. We're going out. What? You, me, actual adult time. Maya's going to Mrs. Patterson's for a few hours. I didn't arrange that. I did. She's thrilled. Apparently she's been waiting for an excuse to spoil Maya rotten. Ethan blinked. You can't just... I already did. Go get ready. 20 minutes later, they were driving out of town with the windows down and the radio playing something upbeat that Ethan didn't recognize. Arya drove like she did everything else, confident and a little reckless, one hand on the wheel and the other tapping out the beat on her thigh. Where are we going? Ethan asked. Does it matter? Kind of. There's a state park about 30 minutes from here, hiking trails, decent views. Figured we could use some space. Ethan hadn't been hiking in years. The last time was before Maya was born, back when he and his ex-wife still pretended they liked spending time together. The memory felt distant, like it belonged to someone else's life. They parked at the trailhead and started walking. The path was narrow and uneven, winding through trees that blocked out most of the sunlight. Birds called from somewhere overhead. The air smelled like pine and dirt, and something green he couldn't name. Arya walked ahead of him, sure-footed and relaxed. "You're too quiet." "Just thinking." "About?" "Everything." "That's specific." Ethan kicked at a rock on the path. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "This. Us. Letting someone in." Arya slowed down until they were walking side by side. "You're doing fine." "I don't feel like it." "Nobody ever does." They walked in silence for a while, the path climbing steadily upward. Ethan's legs started to burn, but he didn't say anything. The physical discomfort was easier to handle than the mess in his head. "Can I ask you something?" Arya said eventually. "Yeah." "Why'd you say yes to all of this?" Ethan glanced at her. "What do you mean?" "You were fine before I showed up. You had your routine, your safe little world. I came in and complicated everything. So why'd you let me?" He thought about it, trying to find the right words. "Because I was tired of fine. And because Maya liked you. And because—" He stopped walking. "Because when I kissed you at that stupid festival, I felt something I didn't think I could feel anymore." Arya stopped too, turning to face him. "What did you feel?" "Alive? Scared. Like maybe I wasn't just going through the motions." She smiled, soft and a little sad. "Yeah, I felt that too." They stood there at the middle of the trail, sunlight filtering through the trees in patches, and Ethan felt the fear loosen its grip just enough to breathe. "I'm going to mess this up," he said quietly. "Probably." "That doesn't scare you?" "Terrifies me. But I'm still here." Ethan reached for her hand. She took it without hesitation, her fingers lacing through his like they'd done it 1,000 times before. They kept walking. The trail opened up eventually into a clearing with a view of the valley below. Arya sat down on a flat rock and pulled Ethan down beside her. They sat in silence, watching the wind move through the trees, and Ethan felt something settle inside him. Not peace, exactly, but something close. "This is nice," he said after a while. "Yeah. We should do this more often." "Agreed." Arya leaned her head on his shoulder, and Ethan wrapped an arm around her. The sun was warm on his face. The world felt bigger and smaller at the same time. "Can I tell you something?" Arya said. "Sure." "I think I'm falling for you, and that scares the hell out of me." Ethan's heart kicked hard against his ribs. "Why does it scare you?" "Because I've never had anything worth losing before." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the smell of her shampoo. "I'm falling for you too." "Yeah?" "Yeah." They sat there until the sun started to dip lower in the sky, painting everything gold and orange. Then they hiked back down, got in the car, and drove home, Arya's hand resting on his knee the entire way. When they picked Maya up from Mrs. Patterson's, she was covered in flour and grinning like she'd won the lottery. "We made cookies," she announced. "I can see that," Ethan said, brushing flour off her nose. Mrs. Patterson appeared in the doorway, smiling. "She's a natural. You should bring her by more often." "I'll keep that in mind." Maya climbed into the back seat of Arya's car, still chattering about the cookies. Ethan got in the passenger seat, and Arya started the engine. They drove home through the fading light, and for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt like things might actually be okay. That night, after Maya was asleep, Arya stayed over. Not in a romantic way. They weren't there yet, hadn't talked about that step. But just to be there. They sat on the couch with the TV on low, Arya's head on his chest, his hand tracing lazy circles on her shoulder. "This is good," she murmured. "Yeah. I could get used to this." "Me too." They fell asleep like that, tangled together on the couch, the house quiet around them. Ethan woke up at 2 a.m. to find Arya still asleep, her breathing slow and even. He carefully extracted himself and went to check on Maya. She was sprawled across her bed, one leg hanging off the edge, her bear clutched to her chest. Ethan pulled the blanket over her and stood there for a minute, watching her sleep. He thought about what Maya had asked in the car that day. "Do you miss her?" He'd said he used to, and that was true. But standing there now, looking at his daughter and thinking about Arya asleep on his couch, he realized something else. He didn't just not miss his ex-wife anymore. He was grateful she'd left, because if she hadn't, he never would have learned how to do this on his own, never would have built the life he had now, never would have been ready for someone like Arya. It was a strange kind of gratitude, twisted and complicated, but it was real. Ethan went back to the living room and carefully lifted Arya into his arms. She stirred but didn't wake, and he carried her to his bedroom, laying her down on the bed. He climbed in beside her, and she immediately curled into him, her hand finding his in the dark. "You okay?" she mumbled, half asleep. "Yeah, go back to sleep." She was out again in seconds. Ethan lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, and felt the fear still there in the back of his mind. But it was quieter now, manageable. He could do this. They could do this. He just had to keep believing it. The next few weeks fell into a new pattern. Arya started spending most evenings at their place, helping with dinner or homework or just existing in the same space. Maya grew more comfortable with her, asking her opinion on everything from what to wear to school to whether unicorns were real. Arya answered every question seriously, never talking down to her, and Maya soaked it up like she'd been starving for that kind of attention. Ethan watched them together and felt his chest tighten with something he couldn't name. Not quite fear, not quite hope. Something in between. One night, Maya asked if Arya could read her a bedtime story. Ethan stood in the hallway listening to Arya's voice through the crack in the door, soft and steady, making up voices for all the characters. When she finished, Maya said, "Can you stay until I fall asleep?" Of course. Ethan walked away before he could hear more, his throat tight. He went to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water, staring out the window at the dark yard. A few minutes later, Arya appeared behind him. "She's out." "That was fast." "I'm very boring." "You're not boring." Arya wrapped her arms around his waist from behind, resting her cheek against his back. "She asked if I was going to be her mom." Ethan's hand tightened on the glass. "What did you say?" "I said I wasn't trying to replace anyone, but that I cared about her a lot." "And?" "She said that was okay, that she cared about me too." Ethan set the glass down and turned to face her. "That doesn't freak you out?" "A little, but in a good way." "There's a good way to be freaked out?" "Apparently." She kissed him, and Ethan kissed her back, and for a moment everything else faded. The fear, the doubt, the constant voice in his head telling him this couldn't last. When they broke apart, Arya looked at him seriously. "I'm not going anywhere, Ethan. I need you to know that." "I'm trying to believe it." "Try harder." He smiled despite himself. "Okay." They went to bed together that night, actually together this time, and it felt like crossing a line they'd been dancing around for weeks. It wasn't perfect. It was awkward in places, tentative and unsure, but it was real. And when they lay tangled together afterward, Arya's head on his chest and his arm around her shoulders, Ethan felt something click into place. This was what he'd been afraid of. This closeness, this vulnerability. But it was also what he'd been missing. "I love you," he said into the darkness. Arya went still. Then she propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "Say that again." "I love you." Her eyes shimmered. "You mean that?" "Yeah." She kissed him hard, her hand cupping his face. "I love you too." They held each other in the dark, and Ethan felt the last piece of armor he'd been wearing finally crack and fall away. He was exposed now, vulnerable, completely at her mercy. And for the first time in 3 years, that didn't feel like the end of the world. It felt like the beginning of something worth fighting for. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in October, 3 months after Ethan had said those 3 words in the dark. He was in the workshop putting the final touches on a rocking chair when his phone buzzed with a number he hadn't seen in over a year. His ex-wife's name flashed on the screen. Rebecca. Ethan stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Hello?" "Ethan, hi." Her voice sounded the same, careful, measured, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "I'm working. What do you need?" "I wanted to talk about Maya." His stomach tightened. "What about her?" "I'd like to see her, for Thanksgiving. I know it's short notice, but David and I are going to be in town visiting his parents, and I thought, no. Silence on the other end. Then, excuse me? You heard me? No. Ethan, she's my daughter too. You gave up that right when you left. That's not fair. Fair? Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. You haven't called in 4 months. You missed her birthday. Again. You send cards twice a year like that counts for something. And now you want to show up for Thanksgiving and play mom for a weekend? I know I haven't been perfect. You haven't been anything. Rebecca's voice went cold. I'm not asking your permission. I'm letting you know as a courtesy. I have legal visitation rights. Then use them. Go through the court. But you're not just showing up and disrupting her life because it's convenient for you. She's 7 years old. She needs her mother. She needed her mother 3 years ago. Where were you then? Another pause. I made mistakes, Ethan. I'm trying to fix them. By calling 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, that's not fixing anything. That's easing your conscience. You don't get to decide what kind of relationship I have with my daughter. Yeah, actually, I do. Because I'm the one who's been here. I'm the one who held her when she cried, asking why mommy didn't love her anymore. I'm the one who answers the questions you left behind. So until you can prove you're serious about being in her life, consistently, not just when it fits your schedule, my answer is no. He hung up before she could respond. His hands were shaking. He set the phone down on the workbench and pressed his palms flat against the wood, trying to steady himself. The anger was hot and immediate, burning through his chest like he'd swallowed acid. The workshop door opened. Arya stepped inside, her hair pulled back, wearing paint-stained overalls. She took one look at his face and stopped. What happened? Rebecca called. Oh. She wants to see Maya for Thanksgiving. Arya walked over and leaned against the workbench beside him. What did you say? I said no. How'd that go? About as well as you'd expect. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. She threatened to take me to court. Can she do that? Legally? Yeah. The custody agreement gives her visitation. He broke off, his jaw tight. I don't trust her. She's going to show up, play the loving mother for 2 days, and then disappear for another 6 months. And Maya's going to be the one who gets hurt. Arya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, What does Maya want? I haven't told her yet. Maybe you should. She's 7. She's smart, and she deserves to have a say in this. Ethan looked at her. What if she says yes? What if she wants to see her? Then you let her, and you're there to pick up the pieces if it goes bad. That's a terrible plan. You have a better one? He didn't. Arya reached over and took his hand, squeezing it once. You don't have to decide right now. Just think about it. I don't want to think about it. I want to pretend that call never happened. I know, but it did. Ethan closed his eyes and let out a long breath. I hate this. I know. They stood there in the quiet workshop, sunlight filtering through the dusty windows, and Ethan felt the weight of it settle over him like a blanket. The past 3 months had been good. Better than good, actually. Arya had started staying over most nights. Maya called her by name without hesitation, sometimes forgetting to check if it was okay first. They'd fallen into a routine that felt almost like a real family. And now Rebecca was back, threatening to blow it all apart. That night, Ethan sat Maya down at the kitchen table after dinner. Arya had offered to leave, to give them space, but Ethan asked her to stay. She sat on the couch in the living room, close enough to hear but far enough to give them privacy. I need to talk to you about something, Ethan said. Maya looked up from her homework, her pencil pausing mid-word. Am I in trouble? No, nothing like that. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. Your mom called today. Maya's face went very still. Oh. She wants to see you. For Thanksgiving. Silence. Maya stared down at her worksheet, her expression unreadable. Ethan waited, giving her time to process. Does she want to come here? Maya asked finally. I don't know. We didn't get that far. What did you say? I said no. Maya looked up sharply. Why? Because she hasn't been around. Because she doesn't get to show up when it's convenient and pretend everything's fine. But she's my mom. I know. Don't I get to decide? Ethan felt his chest tighten. What do you want, kiddo? Maya's eyes filled with tears. I don't know. That's okay. Is it? Yeah. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smudging pencil lead across her cheek. I miss her sometimes, but I'm also mad at her. Is that bad? No, that's normal. I don't know if I want to see her. What if she leaves again? She probably will. Maya flinched. Ethan immediately regretted his honesty, but he couldn't take it back now. I'm sorry, he said. That was... No. You're right. Maya's voice was small. She always leaves. Yeah. So why would I want to see her? Because she's your mom. And maybe part of you hopes it'll be different this time. Maya nodded slowly, her eyes still down. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. She went back to her homework, but Ethan could tell she wasn't really seeing the words. He stood up and kissed the top of her head before walking into the living room where Arya sat with her knees pulled up to her chest. That went well, he muttered, sinking onto the couch beside her. You were honest with her. That's good. I made her cry. She needed to cry. She's been holding that in for years. Ethan leaned his head back and stared at the ceiling. I don't know what I'm doing. Nobody does. You keep saying that. Because it's true. Arya shifted closer, tucking herself against his side. Ethan wrapped an arm around her and closed his eyes, trying to quiet the noise in his head. What if she chooses to see Rebecca? He said quietly. Then you support her. And when Rebecca bails again, you support her through that too. I don't know if I can watch her go through that. You won't have a choice, but you won't be doing it alone. Ethan opened his eyes and looked down at her. You're staying, even with all this mess? I told you, I'm not going anywhere. This is a lot. I know. Most people would run. Arya smiled, sad and tired. Good thing I'm not most people. He kissed her forehead, and they sat there in the quiet until Maya came out of the kitchen and climbed onto the couch between them, wedging herself into the small space like she belonged there, which, Ethan realized, she did. The next morning, Maya came downstairs and announced that she didn't want to see her mother. You're sure? Ethan asked. Yeah. If she wanted to see me, she'd call me, not you. It was a brutal assessment from a 7-year-old, but Ethan couldn't argue with the logic. He called Rebecca back and told her Maya's decision. She didn't take it well. This is your fault, she said, her voice sharp. You're turning her against me. I'm not doing anything. She made this choice on her own. She's 7. She doesn't know what she wants. She knows enough. I'm her mother, Ethan. Then act like it. Show up when it's hard, not just when it's convenient. Call her on random Tuesdays. Remember what grade she's in. Be consistent, and maybe then she'll trust you enough to say yes. Rebecca hung up on him. Ethan set his phone down and felt a strange sense of relief mixed with dread. He'd stood up for Maya. He'd done the right thing. But he also knew this wasn't over. 2 days later, a letter arrived from Rebecca's lawyer. It outlined her intention to petition for modified custody arrangements, including regular visitation. Ethan read it twice, his hands shaking, and then called the only lawyer he knew, a guy named Tom who'd handled his divorce 3 years ago. Tom's voice was gruff over the phone. She can petition all she wants. Doesn't mean she'll win, but you need to be prepared for a fight. I don't have money for a fight. Then you better hope she backs down. Ethan hung up and sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands. Arya found him there 20 minutes later when she came over to drop off groceries. What's wrong? He handed her the letter without a word. She read it, her expression darkening. She's serious. Yeah. What are you going to do? I don't know. Fight it, I guess. Hope she gives up before I run out of money. Arya set the letter down and pulled out the chair across from him. How much do you need? What? For the lawyer. How much? I'm not taking your money. I'm not offering. I'm asking how much you need so I know what we're dealing with. Arya, but we're in this together, remember? That includes the bad parts. Ethan looked at her, this woman who'd walked into his life 6 months ago and somehow become essential to it. A couple thousand, probably. Maybe more, depending on how long it drags out. I have savings. I can't. You can, and you will, because Maya needs you focused on her, not on how you're going to pay bills. Ethan's throat tightened. I'll pay you back. I don't care about that. I do. Arya reached across the table and took his hand. Okay, but we're dealing with this together. No more trying to carry everything yourself. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. The legal battle stretched on for 6 weeks. Phone calls with the lawyer, paperwork, court dates that got rescheduled, Rebecca's lawyer pushing for supervised visitation, Ethan's lawyer arguing that Rebecca had forfeited her right to disrupt Maya's stability. It was exhausting and expensive and emotionally draining, and the only thing that kept Ethan sane was Arya. She showed up every day, often without being asked, made dinner when he forgot to eat, sat with Maya and painted while Ethan was on the phone with Tom, held him at night when the anxiety got so bad he couldn't sleep. I don't deserve you, he said one night, lying in bed with her head on his chest. Shut up. I mean it. You think I'm doing this because you deserve it? I'm doing it because I love you, and because Maya needs stability right now. That's it. That's everything. She propped herself up and looked at him in the dark. You'd do the same for me. Would I? Yeah, you would. You're too stubborn not to. Ethan smiled despite everything. You calling me stubborn? Extremely stubborn. It's one of your worst qualities. What are the others? You make terrible coffee, you overthink everything, you apologize too much. That's only 3. I'm still compiling the list. He pulled her down and kissed her, and for a few minutes the rest of the world disappeared. The court hearing was scheduled for early December. Ethan put on the only suit he owned, the same one he'd worn to his wedding and then his divorce, and tried not to throw up in the courthouse bathroom. Arya wanted to come, but he asked her to stay with Maya instead. He didn't want his daughter anywhere near this. Tom met him in the hallway outside the courtroom. You ready? No? Good. Means you're taking it seriously. Rebecca was already inside with her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in a gray suit who barely glanced at Ethan when he walked in. Rebecca looked different. Her hair was shorter. She'd lost weight. She was wearing makeup and a dress that probably cost more than Ethan made in a month. She didn't meet his eyes. The hearing was brutal. Rebecca's lawyer painted a picture of a woman who'd made mistakes but was ready to be a mother again. She talked about Rebecca's stable marriage, her steady job, her new apartment with a bedroom set up for Maya. Ethan's lawyer countered with the facts. 3 years of minimal contact, missed birthdays, broken promises. A child who'd explicitly said she didn't want visitation. The judge, a tired-looking man in his 60s, listened to both sides without expression. When it was over, he took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. I'm granting supervised visitation, he said, 1 weekend a month to be supervised by a neutral third party. We'll revisit in 6 months to assess whether unsupervised visitation is appropriate. Ethan felt his stomach drop. It wasn't full custody, but it wasn't nothing either. Your Honor, his lawyer started, my decision is final. Court adjourned. The gavel came down. Ethan stood there, numb, while people filed out around him. Rebecca left without looking back, her lawyer's hand on her elbow, and Ethan was left standing in an empty courtroom trying to figure out how to explain this to Maya. He drove home in silence, his hands tight on the wheel. When he pulled into the driveway, Arya was sitting on the front porch waiting for him. She stood up as he got out of the car, her expression careful. How bad? Supervised visitation. 1 weekend a month. Arya's face fell. Ethan, I need to tell Maya. Want me to come with you? Yeah. They found Maya in her room, sprawled on her bed reading a book. She looked up when they walked in, and her face went pale. What happened? Ethan sat down on the edge of her bed. The judge said your mom can see you, 1 weekend a month, with someone there to supervise. Maya's eyes filled with tears. I have to go? Yeah, kiddo, I'm sorry. I don't want to. I know. Can't you fix it? The question broke something in Ethan's chest. I tried. This is the best I could do. Maya threw her arms around his neck and sobbed. Ethan held her, feeling useless and furious and heartbroken all at once. Arya sat down on the other side of the bed and put a hand on Maya's back, silent support. I don't want to leave you, Maya cried. It's just for a weekend. You'll come back. Promise? Promise. They sat there until Maya cried herself out. When she finally pulled back, her face was red and splotchy, her eyes swollen. Can Arya come? She asked, her voice small. I don't think they'll let her. Why not? Because it's supposed to be time with your mom. Maya looked at Arya. I wish you were my mom. The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Arya's eyes went bright with tears, but she didn't let them fall. I'm not your mom, she said gently, but I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. Promise? Promise. Maya crawled into Arya's lap, and Arya held her while Ethan watched, feeling something shift in his chest. This was his family, not the one he'd planned, not the one he'd imagined, but the one he had, messy and complicated and real. And he'd fight for it, whatever it took. The first supervised visit was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Ethan drove Maya to the meeting place, a bland office building downtown with a waiting room that smelled like stale coffee and industrial cleaner. The supervisor was a middle-aged woman named Carol, who tried too hard to be friendly. Rebecca was already there, sitting in one of the plastic chairs with her hands folded in her lap. She stood up when she saw Maya, her face brightening. Hi, sweetheart. Maya didn't say anything. She pressed closer to Ethan's side, her hand gripping his. It's okay, Ethan said quietly. I'll be right here when you're done. I don't want to go. I know, but you have to. Rebecca stepped forward. We're going to have fun, Maya. I promise. Maya looked up at Ethan, her eyes pleading. He wanted to grab her and run, to get in the car and drive until they were somewhere Rebecca's lawyers couldn't find them. But he couldn't do that, so instead he crouched down and hugged her tight. 2 hours. Then I'll be back. Okay, Maya whispered. She let go of his hand and walked over to Rebecca, her shoulders hunched. Rebecca reached out to take her hand, but Maya pulled away. The supervisor, Carol, stepped in smoothly, guiding them toward a room in the back. The door closed. Ethan stood there for a long moment, staring at it, before forcing himself to leave. He sat in his truck in the parking lot for the full 2 hours, unable to drive away. His phone buzzed with a text from Arya. How'd it go? She didn't want to go, but she went. You there now? Sitting in the parking lot. Want company? I'm okay. I'll see you when I get home. I love you. Ethan stared at the words, feeling something tight in his chest ease just a little. I love you too. When the 2 hours were up, Ethan went back inside. Maya came out of the room looking exhausted. Rebecca followed, trying to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She did great, Carol said brightly. Yeah, Rebecca added. We had a good time, right, Maya? Maya didn't answer. She walked straight to Ethan and grabbed his hand. Can we go? Yeah, kiddo, let's go. He didn't look at Rebecca on the way out. In the truck, Maya was silent. Ethan glanced over at her as they drove. You okay? She tried too hard. What do you mean? She kept asking me questions like she was reading from a list, and she brought me a stuffed animal. I'm 7, not 3. Maybe she didn't know what else to do. Maybe she should have asked. Ethan didn't have an answer for that. When they got home, Arya was in the kitchen making hot chocolate. Maya went straight to her, wrapping her arms around Arya's waist and holding on tight. Arya set down the spoon and held her back, her eyes meeting Ethan's over Maya's head. Rough? She mouthed. Ethan nodded. They spent the rest of the evening quiet, the three of them curled up on the couch, watching movies Maya had seen a dozen times. She fell asleep between them around 9, her head on Arya's shoulder, her feet in Ethan's lap. She's going to be okay, Arya said softly. How do you know? Because she has you, and now she has me. Ethan looked at her, this woman who'd stepped into their chaos and somehow made it bearable. What did I do to deserve you? You opened the door when I brought over your package. Everything else just followed. He smiled. That simple? That's simple. Maya stirred in her sleep, and Arya adjusted her hold, cradling her closer. Ethan watched them together and felt the fear that had been his constant companion for 3 years finally start to fade. He couldn't protect Maya from everything, couldn't stop her mother from disappointing her, couldn't shield her from the world's sharp edges. But he could give her this. A home. Stability. Love that didn't come with conditions, and with Arya beside him, maybe that was enough. The supervised visits continued through December and into January. Every month, Ethan drove Maya to that same sterile office and watched her walk through that door with shoulders that got a little less tense each time. Rebecca tried. He had to give her that. She showed up on time, brought age-appropriate gifts, asked better questions. But there was a distance there that never quite closed, a formality that made the whole thing feel like a performance neither of them had auditioned for. Maya handled it better than Ethan expected. She came home from each visit tired but not broken, and she talked about it less and less until it became just another thing she did, like piano lessons or dentist appointments, something to endure and move past. What she talked about more was Arya. "Can Arya come to parent-teacher conferences?" she asked one morning over breakfast. Ethan looked up from his coffee. "Your mom might be there." "So?" "So it might be awkward." Maya shrugged, pushing her cereal around the bowl. "Everything's awkward with her anyway. At least if Arya's there, someone will actually care about what Mrs. Chen says." "Your mom cares." "No, she doesn't. She just pretends to, so the supervisor lady writes good things in her report." Ethan couldn't argue with that assessment. "I'll ask Arya." "She'll say yes. She always says yes." She was right. When Ethan brought it up that night, Arya was in the middle of washing dishes and didn't even pause. "Of course I'll come." "You don't have to." "I want to. Maya asked. That's enough." "Rebecca's going to be there." Arya turned off the water and dried her hands on a towel, looking at him with that direct stare that still caught him off guard sometimes. "I'm not scared of Rebecca." "I know. I just don't want it to be uncomfortable for you." "Ethan." She walked over and put her hands on his shoulders. "I'm going to be uncomfortable a lot of places in this life. Parent-teacher conferences with my—" She paused, searching for the right word. "With Maya. That's not one of them." "You were going to say something else." "What?" "You said, with my, and then stopped." Arya's face colored slightly. "Did I?" "Yeah." She looked away, but Ethan caught her chin gently, turning her face back to his. "What were you going to say?" "With my daughter," Arya said quietly. "That's what it feels like, even though she's not. Even though I know that's not technically a—" Ethan kissed her before she could finish. When they broke apart, Arya was smiling. "Was that a yes?" she asked. "To what?" "To me being completely insane and attached to a kid who isn't mine." "You're not insane. And yeah, that's a yes." The parent-teacher conference was exactly as awkward as Ethan had predicted. Rebecca showed up 10 minutes early, dressed like she was interviewing for a job, and her smile went brittle when she saw Arya sitting next to Ethan in the hallway outside Mrs. Chen's classroom. "I didn't realize you were bringing someone," Rebecca said, her voice tight. "Maya asked her to come." "Maya's 7. She doesn't get to make those decisions." "She does in my house." Rebecca's mouth thinned, but before she could respond, Mrs. Chen opened the door and invited them in. They sat in child-sized chairs around a table covered in Maya's artwork and math worksheets, and Mrs. Chen talked about Maya's progress with genuine warmth. "She's doing wonderfully," the teacher said. "Her reading level is above grade standard, and she's made real strides in math since the beginning of the year. Socially, she's still a bit reserved, but she has a close group of friends and she's stopped having those outbursts we talked about in the fall." Ethan felt a flash of gratitude toward Arya, who'd spent hours helping Maya work through the anger that had led to the pushing incident. Rebecca, who had no idea what Mrs. Chen was referring to, just nodded along. "She talks about you a lot," Mrs. Chen said, looking at Arya. Rebecca stiffened. "I'm sorry, who are you exactly?" "I'm Arya. She glanced at Ethan. "I'm Ethan's partner." "Partner." Rebecca said the word like it tasted bad. "And you're involved in my daughter's education?" "I help with homework sometimes, and I come to things Maya invites me to." "How nice." Rebecca's smile was all teeth. "But I'm her mother. Perhaps we should keep this conversation between her actual parents and her teacher." Arya opened her mouth, but Ethan spoke first. "Arya stays. This is about Maya, and Maya wants her here. If that's a problem, you can leave." Rebecca's face flushed. "You can't just replace me with the first woman who—" "Nobody's replacing anyone," Mrs. Chen interrupted, her voice firm but kind. "We're all here because we care about Maya. Let's focus on that." The rest of the conference passed in tense silence, Rebecca refusing to look at Arya and Ethan, gripping Arya's hand under the table hard enough to hurt. When it was over, they filed out into the hallway. Rebecca left immediately, her heels clicking sharply against the linoleum. Arya let out a long breath. "Well, that went great." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I knew what I was signing up for." "Did you?" She looked at him seriously. Yeah, I did. They walked to the car holding hands, and Ethan realized something had shifted. Not just for him, but for all three of them. They weren't pretending anymore. This was real. Messy and complicated and sometimes painful, but real. When they got home, Maya was sitting at the kitchen table with Mrs. Patterson, who'd agreed to watch her during the conference. She looked up when they walked in, her eyes searching their faces. How'd it go? Good, Ethan said. Mrs. Chen says you're doing great. Was Mom there? Yeah. Was she mean to Arya? Arya crouched down next to Maya's chair. A little, but that's okay. It's not okay. You didn't do anything wrong. I know, kid, but sometimes people get scared when things change, and they don't know how to handle it. Your mom's probably scared. Of what? Of losing you. Maya thought about that for a moment. Then she said, She already lost me. She just doesn't know it yet. The words were brutal and honest, and Arya pulled Maya into a hug without saying anything else. Ethan watched them and felt something settle in his chest. Maya had made her choice, and whether Rebecca accepted it or not didn't change the reality of their life. Valentine's Day came in the middle of February, which Ethan had completely forgotten about until Maya reminded him at breakfast. You're getting Arya something, right? What? No, I mean, should I? Maya rolled her eyes. Dad, she's your girlfriend. You have to get her something. Since when do you know about Valentine's Day? Since forever. All the kids at school are talking about it. Great. You could make her something. You're good at making stuff. Ethan considered that. What would I make? I don't know. Something nice. Something that shows you love her. You think I love her? Maya gave him a look that was far too knowing for a 7-year-old. Duh. So Ethan spent the next 3 days in his workshop after Maya went to bed, building something he'd been thinking about for weeks but hadn't had the courage to start. A jewelry box. Small, simple, made from cherry wood with dovetail joints and a velvet-lined interior. He carved Arya's initials into the lid, then sanded them smooth until they were barely visible, unless you knew where to look. When he finished, he stood back and stared at it, wondering if it was too much or not enough. If it said what he wanted it to say. If she'd understand what he was trying to tell her. Maya found him there at midnight, standing in the workshop with sawdust in his hair. Dad, you okay? He turned. What are you doing up? I heard you out here. What is that? She walked over and picked up the box, turning it over in her hands. Her face softened. It's perfect. You think? Yeah, she's gonna love it. It's just a box. It's not just a box. Maya set it down carefully and looked up at him. It means you're serious about her. I am serious about her. Then give it to her. Valentine's Day fell on a Saturday. Ethan made breakfast, French toast again because it was becoming his signature move apparently, and handed Arya the box across the table. She looked at it, then at him, her eyes wide. You made this? Yeah. She opened it slowly, running her fingers over the wood grain and the carved initials. Her eyes filled with tears. Ethan. It's not much. I just thought... She stood up, walked around the table, and kissed him hard enough to make his head spin. When she pulled back, she was smiling through tears. I love it. I love you. I love you too. Maya made a gagging sound from across the table. Gross. They both laughed, and Arya pulled Maya into the hug, the three of them standing in the kitchen surrounded by the smell of syrup and coffee, and something that felt dangerously close to happiness. That night, after Maya went to bed, Arya brought up something that had been hovering between them for weeks. I'm going to give up my lease. Ethan looked up from the book he was pretending to read. What? My duplex. The lease is up in March. I'm not renewing it. Where are you going to live? Arya sat down on the couch beside him, tucking her legs under her. I was hoping I could stay here. Officially. Ethan's heart kicked against his ribs. You want to move in? If that's okay. I know it's fast, and I know Maya might need time to adjust, and if it's too much, we can... Yes. Arya stopped mid-sentence. Yes? Yeah, move in, please. She laughed, surprised and relieved. You're sure? I've been sure for months. I was just waiting for you to figure it out. You could have asked. I was scared you'd say no. That's stupid. Probably. She kissed him again, softer this time, and Ethan felt the last piece of resistance he'd been carrying finally let go. This was happening. They were really doing this. When they told Maya the next morning, she didn't even look up from her cereal. Finally. "You're not surprised?" Ethan asked. "Dad, her toothbrush has been in our bathroom for 3 months. I'm not an idiot." Arya laughed so hard she had to sit down. "Kid, you're the smartest person in this house." "I know." Arya moved in 2 weeks later. It took exactly 1 carload. She didn't have much, just clothes and art supplies and a few pieces of furniture that didn't fit in Ethan's house anyway. They spent a weekend rearranging things, making space in closets and drawers, hanging her paintings on walls that had been bare for years. Maya helped, offering opinions on everything and claiming Arya's old reading chair for her room. Arya let her have it without argument, and Ethan watched them negotiate the logistics of shared space with an ease that made his chest ache. This was his family. Not the one he'd planned, not the one society said counted, but the one they'd built together, piece by piece, through honesty and patience and the willingness to show up even when it was hard. March turned into April. The supervised visits with Rebecca continued, but Maya's investment in them dwindled. She went because the court said she had to, but she came home and went straight to Arya, who always had paint or hot chocolate or just a quiet presence waiting. Rebecca noticed. During one pickup, she pulled Ethan aside. "She doesn't talk to me anymore." "What do you mean?" "During our visits. She answers questions, but she doesn't volunteer anything. She's polite, but it's like talking to a stranger." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. "Maybe because that's what you are to her." Rebecca's face crumpled. "I'm her mother." "You gave birth to her, but you haven't been her mother in 3 years." "I'm trying now." "I know. But trying doesn't erase the past, and it doesn't mean she owes you forgiveness." "So what am I supposed to do?" "I don't know. Keep showing up, I guess. And hope it's enough." Rebecca looked like she wanted to argue, but she just nodded and walked back inside. Ethan stood there for a moment, feeling something that wasn't quite sympathy, but wasn't quite satisfaction either. Just a dull ache for the mess all of them had made and were still trying to clean up. The 6-month review came in late April. The judge reviewed Carol's reports, listened to both lawyers, and asked Maya, now 8 years old and startlingly articulate, what she wanted. "I want the visits to stop," Maya said clearly. The judge studied her. "Can you tell me why?" "Because they don't feel real. My mom asks me questions like she's taking a test, and I answer them, and then we run out of things to say. I don't think she actually wants to know me. I think she just wants to not feel guilty anymore." The courtroom went silent. Rebecca was crying, her lawyer's hand on her arm. Ethan sat frozen, equal parts proud and heartbroken for his daughter, who'd had to learn these truths too young. The judge took off his glasses. "I'm terminating the visitation order. Miss Walker, you're welcome to petition again in the future if circumstances change. But for now, I'm ruling in favor of stability for the child." The gavel came down. It was over. Ethan and Maya walked out of the courthouse into bright spring sunshine. Maya was quiet, her hand in his. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, is that bad? That I'm not sad?" "No, kiddo, that's honest. I feel like I should be sad." "You don't have to feel anything you don't feel." They got in the truck and drove home. Arya was waiting on the porch, and when Maya saw her, she broke into a run. Arya caught her, lifting her up even though Maya was getting too big for it, and held her while Maya cried tears she probably didn't understand. "It's over," Maya said into Arya's shoulder. "I know, baby. I know. I don't have to go back." "No, you don't." They stood there in the front yard, the 3 of them, while the world moved around them. And Ethan thought about all the ways love could look, the ways family could form, the ways people could break and rebuild and find something better than what they'd lost. Life didn't stop being complicated after that. Maya still had hard days. Ethan still worried about money and whether he was doing enough. Arya still had doubts about whether she belonged in this family she'd stumbled into. But they figured it out together. Summer came. Arya started getting more commission work, enough that she could contribute to bills and feel less like she was freeloading. Maya finished 2nd grade at the top of her class and spent the summer painting in Arya's makeshift studio, asking questions about color theory and perspective that Arya answered with genuine enthusiasm. Ethan built a deck off the back of the house, and they spent evenings out there watching fireflies while Maya ran around the yard catching them in jars and then letting them go. In July, Arya woke up feeling sick. At first she blamed it on bad takeout, then on stress. But when it lasted a week, Ethan convinced her to see a doctor. She came home from the appointment pale and shaking. Ethan was in the workshop when she found him, and he knew immediately something was wrong. What happened? Arya sat down on his workbench, her hands trembling. I'm pregnant. The words hit him like a physical blow. He set down the chisel he'd been holding, his mind going completely blank. You're what? Pregnant. About 6 weeks, they think. But I thought you were on... I was. I don't know what happened. The doctor said sometimes it just fails. Ethan sat down hard on a stool. Okay. Okay? That's all you have to say? I'm processing. We'll process faster because I'm freaking out. He looked at her. She was crying now, silent tears running down her face. He stood up and pulled her into his arms, holding her while his own mind raced. A baby. They were going to have a baby. Are you... He didn't know how to finish that question. What do you want to do? I don't know. I know what I want. I just don't know if it's what you want. What do you want? To keep it. She pulled back to look at him. I want to keep it. I want this family. I want everything, even though it terrifies me. Ethan cupped her face in his hands. Then we keep it. You're sure? No, I'm terrified too, but I'm sure about you, about us, about this. Arya kissed him hard, and Ethan kissed her back, and somewhere in the chaos of fear and uncertainty, he felt something else rising up. Hope. Actual, genuine hope. They told Maya that night after dinner. She was in the living room drawing when they sat down on either side of her. We need to talk to you about something, Ethan said. Maya set down her crayon, looking worried. Am I in trouble? No, nothing like that. We just have some news. What kind of news? Arya took a breath. I'm going to have a baby. You're going to be a big sister. Maya's eyes went wide. Really? Really. When? Probably February, around your birthday. Maya looked between them, her expression unreadable. Then she said, Can I pick the name? Ethan laughed, surprised. We'll definitely consider your suggestions. And can the baby share my room? Eventually, maybe. We'll figure it out. Maya nodded seriously, processing. Then she threw her arms around both of them. This is the best news ever. Arya started crying again, and Ethan felt his own eyes burn. They sat there in a tangle of arms and tears and laughter, and Ethan thought about how far they'd come from that morning 6 months ago when Arya had showed up on his porch with a misdelivered package. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Arya was sick for months, exhausted and irritable, and scared in ways she tried to hide but couldn't quite manage. Ethan did his best to help, taking over cooking, handling more of Maya's routine, holding Arya's hair back when she threw up at 2 a.m. Maya stepped up too, drawing pictures for the baby and talking to Arya's stomach like the baby could already hear her. She made lists of name suggestions, most of them ridiculous. Sparkle, Dragon, Princess Batman, but a few that were actually sweet. In September, they found out they were having a girl. Maya was ecstatic. Ethan was terrified. Arya just cried, which she'd been doing a lot of lately anyway. By October, Arya was showing enough that people in town started to notice. Mrs. Patterson cornered Ethan at the post office with a knowing smile. Congratulations. I always knew you two would work out. Did you? Of course, you had that look. What look? Like you'd found something you didn't want to lose. Ethan thought about that on the drive home. She was right. He had found something, and he'd fought for it harder than he'd fought for anything in his life. The baby arrived 3 weeks early on a freezing night in January. Ethan drove Arya to the hospital at midnight while Maya stayed with Mrs. Patterson. And by 6 a.m, they had a daughter, 5 pounds, 8 ounces, with Arya's dark hair and Ethan's eyes and lungs that could wake the dead. They named her Sophie. Maya's suggestion, not Sparkle or Dragon, but Sophie Grace, which felt right the moment Arya said it out loud. Maya met her sister 2 hours later, sitting in a hospital chair with Ethan's help while Arya placed the baby in her arms. She's so small, Maya whispered. You were smaller. Really? Really? Maya stared at Sophie with an expression of pure wonder. Hi, Sophie. I'm your big sister. I'm going to teach you everything. Arya and Ethan exchanged a look over Maya's head, both of them trying not to cry and failing. They brought Sophie home 3 days later to a house that had been baby-proofed and rearranged and filled with more love than Ethan had thought possible. The first few weeks were chaos, sleepless nights, constant feedings, Maya trying to help and sometimes making things harder. But they figured it out the way they'd figured out everything else. Together. One night in February, Ethan stood in the nursery holding Sophie while she slept. Arya appeared in the doorway, exhausted and beautiful in sweatpants and one of his old t-shirts. You okay? She asked. Yeah, just thinking. About what? About how different everything is. How different I am. Arya walked over and slipped her arm around his waist, resting her head on his shoulder. Different good or different bad? Different good. He looked down at Sophie, her tiny face peaceful in sleep. 3 years ago, I was just trying to survive. Now I'm... Living? Yeah, living. Arya kissed his shoulder. We're pretty good at that now. We are. Maya appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Is Sophie okay? She's perfect. What are you doing up? I wanted to make sure everyone was here. Ethan's chest tightened. We're all here, kiddo. Promise? Promise. Maya climbed up into the rocking chair in the corner, pulling her blanket around her. Can I stay? Just for a little bit? Yeah, you can stay. They stood there in the quiet nursery, Ethan holding Sophie, Arya leaning against him, Maya curled in the chair, and Ethan felt something he'd never felt before. Not just happiness, not just contentment, but a deep, unshakable certainty that this was where he belonged. This messy, complicated, beautiful family they'd built from broken pieces and second chances, and the willingness to be vulnerable enough to love again. Outside, the February wind rattled the windows. Inside, the house was warm, safe, full. Sophie stirred in his arms, making a small sound before settling back to sleep. Arya tightened her arm around his waist. Maya yawned, her eyes drifting closed. And Ethan realized that the thing he'd been most afraid of, letting people in, risking his heart, believing in something good, had turned out to be the thing that saved him. Not because it was easy, not because it was perfect, but was easy. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Because sometimes the family you need isn't the one you start with. It's the one you build, the one you choose, the one that chooses you back. And sometimes the second chance you never thought you deserved turns out to be exactly what you needed all along.